All right, welcome back. This isn't the first time that I've drawn Boom's logo by hand, but it might be the last. It's certainly not a logo that's meant to be recreated on dry erase markers on a whiteboard, and it was certainly challenging, and it didn't turn out super great. I think it turned out passable, but again, I'm gonna have to find some alternative for this team at some point. But regardless, it's a very good logo for a very good team heading into this year's international, coming in as the top seed from Southeast Asia. Boom Esports finished the season with a total of 1,482 DPC points, and that is after deductions as well. They finished 7th place internationally and are coming in as one of the favorites for the championship at this year's international. I'm super stoked to be getting into a preview for you guys. And of course, if you haven't seen it, I've already been posting previews for every single team attending this year's international. If you haven't seen them, check them out on my channel or in the links in the description. Also in the description is a link to our Discord if you want to join that. And for every team that I haven't done a preview of yet, which is every team that's placed ahead of Boom on the DPC standings, which is only 6 teams now, I will be having those videos posted before the Last Chance qualifiers start on October 8th, as well as my Last Chance qualifiers preview. So if you don't want to miss that, share, subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified. And let's get into it. So, Boom Esports. Funny enough, this is not even a team that should have been in the position they were in when this season started. When Boom finished last season, they were actually headed for the lower division in Southeast Asia, and it wasn't until there was a scandal with Omega Esports that were getting promoted to the upper division in Southeast Asia, getting caught for match fixing, that eventually got them eliminated, that suddenly the upper division needed another team, and so Boom was brought back up. And I don't think a lot of people were expecting Boom to have this sudden just skyrocket in success. They went from a team that was just recently relegated to the lower division. They brought together a roster that sure had some pretty big names on it. There was some promise, but not first place in Southeast Asia, not a region like that has so much talent in it. And they proved themselves pretty damn quickly, despite the fact that, again, a lot of these members are pretty new and a lot of them have not attended TI. This will be their first time, including their carry player that they brought in partially through the season, Jackie. His closest run to TI was finishing 7th and 8th place at TI10 qualifiers with Motivate Gaming. Yopaj finished top 6 last year in the TI10 qualifiers with OB Neon. FBZ is the only remaining member from the Boom stack from last year who finished 3rd place in the TI10 qualifiers. And of course, Tim's. He's a veteran. He's been to a few TIs at this point. He's going to be attending his 5th for the 5th time this year, finishing 9th and 12th place at TI7 and 9 with TNC Predator both times. And Skem, the closest he's been, has been finishing 5th and 6th place at TI10 qualifiers with OB Neon as well. So same thing as Yopaj. And for the coach, who could they possibly have as a coach? Well, none other than the legendary Mushi, who as a player attended TI 6 times, his furthest run being finishing 3rd place at TI3 with Orange Esports, and as a coach, his furthest run was finishing 9th to 12th place with Team Secret back at TI9. This will be his 2nd time attending TI as a coach, which is very, very exciting. And again, former member being Tino, who was dropped kind of after Tour 1, but also during Tour 1, and we'll get into that. So, again, SEA, Tour 1, new roster being brought in. How is this going to work? This is a team that should have been in the lower division, but they were given a second chance, and they finished 1st in the division. They go 6-1, earning themselves 300 DPC points right off the bat. And heading into the regionals, they still just didn't seem satisfied with their roster at the time. It seemed like it was pretty notable that the weak point on this team was Tino, their former carry player, and that they were in the market for a new carry player. But they didn't officially make the change to their roster until after the regional finals, but they did play with Jackie standing in during the tour, which during the regional finals, which when you're playing with a stand-in, when you have control of who's playing, you're automatically given a 40% deduction on any points that you earn with that player in your roster. So they finished 1st place in the regional finals, of course. They go 3-1. Earning themselves 250 more points, but again, with that 40-point deduction, they only get 150 of those, as 100 points are immediately taken off. And then that is when they make the official change in their roster, dropping Tino, losing another 68 points, which means that they lost 168 in total. But now that they've got the roster that they've actually been wanting and a roster that they feel comfortable with. So is this roster actually going to succeed? Is this what they really want? Well, in Tour 2, they again went undefeated throughout the entire tour. They technically went 6-1 because there was a weird mishap where they had to forfeit a match against Enigma Galaxy. It was really unfortunate. A lot of people were saying maybe they could have rescheduled it, but at the end of the day, they ended up having to forfeit the match, which was their only loss, which also made it so that they had to play a tiebreaker match against Fnatic, which they lost that series, which is why they finished second place, but still they were technically undefeated up until that point. Regardless, 240 more DPC points, and they got themselves a ticket to Stockholm, which did not go great. They go 0-5-1 in the group stage, so they didn't win a single series, but they also only lost one. A lot of ties. It doesn't get them to the upper bracket, and in their lower bracket matchup, they unfortunately had to play against OG, who at the time we didn't know, but they would end up being the champions of the whole tournament. But really unfortunate for Boom there as they get knocked out right in the first round. They finish 9th to 12th place and walk away with a fat goose egg from the Stockholm Major. So how are they going to bounce back from that? Well, pretty quickly, as they finished first place immediately after that, going 6-1 again, earning themselves 500 more DPC points. The only series that they lost there was to Talon, who they would end up beating in a tiebreaker later on. And at the Arlington Major, sure, it's not maybe as deep as a run as we've been expecting for Boom, but it's still better, and it's still an improvement upon their Stockholm Major. They go 2-3-2 in the groups, so a little bit better there. They start in the upper bracket, but they drop right away pretty much, and they get knocked out after winning one series in the lower bracket against Team Liquid. But regardless, that's still 500 more points for finishing first place in the tour, and 360 more just for finishing top 8 at the tournament. So that is well enough for them to get a whole bunch of points. And again, if we didn't have those deductions on there, that number would be much, much higher. Taking a look at their results against other teams attending this year's International, including teams that are in the last chance qualifiers, they played a total of 70 games against those teams, going 36-34, so just barely above 50%, but still above. In Tour 1, we see that they played very few games against other teams attending TI because Polaris and Talon were still in the lower division of Southeast Asia at this point. They take down Fnatic 2-0. They would lose to T1 in Tour 1. They would then lose to T1 in those regional finals, which would drop them down to the lower bracket, but they would get that rematch in the grand finals where they would take them down 3-1. Heading into Tour 2, they took down Polaris and T1 and Fnatic. Again, the only series that they lost technically in that tour was the forfeit match, but in those tiebreakers against Fnatic, they would lose that 2-0, which drops them down to second. Stockholm, a bunch of ties. They would tie BetBoom, OG, Beast Coast, EG, and T1, eventually losing to Tundra as their final series in the group stage, and then their only match in the main event was against OG. They would lose that one 2-0. So pretty unfortunate there, losing to the eventual champions of the tournament. In Tour 3, they would drop their first series against Talon 2-1, but they would take down Polaris, T1, Fnatic, and win that rematch against Talon 2-1. At the Arlington Major, they would tie Tundra in the group stage, as well as Spirit and Aster. They would take down EG and Navi, but lose to Beast Coast and Entity. And on the main stage, they would, again, have some pretty unfortunate placements, starting off against PSG LGD. That would immediately drop them down to the lower bracket where they would face off against Team Liquid. They took them down 2-1, but then eventually would get knocked out by Entity 2-1, and that was the end of their DPC season. Across their entire DPC year, they played a total of 100 games, which is the most that we've seen, which is very exciting. It means we have a lot of sample size to go through with these stats. They went 62-38, so a very, very high win rate there. Only losing 4 games to teams that aren't attending this year's International in this past year. On Radiant, they were 42-20. Absurdly high win rate. And it's really funny because a lot of these teams that I've been previewing will have a very, very high win rate on Dire and then kind of mediocre on Radiant. And for teams like Boom, it's the complete opposite, which is really fun and really refreshing to see that it's not just one side that teams are preferring. And that means that we're going to have hopefully a little bit more variety at this year's International. On Dire, they were 20-18, so a little bit above 50. First pick, they were 30-15. On the last pick, they were 32-23. For a combination of the two, Radiant first pick, they were 28-13. Apologies. Radiant last pick, they were 14-7, so not as many games, but a 67% win rate there. On Dire first pick, they only played that orientation 4 times out of the 100 games, and they went even 2-2 on it, so pretty obvious why they're not favoring that one as much. And on Dire last pick, they were 18-6. 16 for a 53% win rate. For matches that were less than 40 minutes, they had a win rate of 39 and 18 for a win percentage of 68%. On games that were longer than 40 minutes, they were 23 and 20, so that win rate comes down quite a bit the longer the game goes, which is a little surprising because they do have a very hard carry, farm-centric a hard carry player on their team. One that necessarily won't participate early on, but he'll carry you in the late game. So that is a little bit concerning there. For game ones, they were 24 and 19. Game twos, they were 28 and 15. So much better at bouncing back as opposed to opening in a series. And in game threes, they were pretty solid in those deciding matches, going 9 and 4. For their average GPM, that was 22.66. Average XPM of 27.91, and average KDA of 4.08. So these guys have been very kill first, farm later, other than their carry player, who typically does play that hard carry style. And then an average match duration of quite high, the highest that we've seen, if I'm not mistaken, 39 minutes and 35 seconds. Finally, taking a look at some hero stats now, they picked a total of 81 different heroes across those 100 games, the most picked being Ember Spirit and Mars with 23, Death Prophet and Mirana and Kunkka with 15, and then Razor and Pangolier with 14 each. FBC's Pangolier is really a treat to watch. I really hope we get to see it at some point at this year's International. For best heroes, we have Lion, who went 8 and 1, Medusa, who went 5 and 1, Mirana, who went 12 and 3, Templar Assassin, Lifestealer, and Winter Wyvern, who went 8 and 2. We then have Ember Spirit, who went 18 and 5, an absurdly high win rate. The Yopaj Ember Spirit is also a real treat. I hope we get to see some of that this year's International. Ember Spirit feels pretty good, so I'm hoping that we get to see it. And then finally, Sand King, who went 7 and 2. Not a hero we've seen a whole lot of over this past year, but whenever Boom picked it, it looked pretty damn good. For their worst heroes, Disruptor 0 and 3, Timbersaw 1 and 6, and Monkey King 4 and 8. And for bans now, they banned a total of 94 different heroes, the most of which being on Razor with 31, Death Prophet with 30, and Lena with 27. So yeah, Boom, again, looking like one of the favorites. They're the top team coming in from Southeast Asia, as if you're looking at DPC points. If you're obviously thinking that maybe Fnatic or Talon are one of the top teams, or even if T1 makes it through those last chance qualifiers, maybe they would be one of the top teams. Totally understand, but Boom arguably is the favorite coming in from Southeast Asia, but they have struggled on LAN over this past year. Will that continue to be an issue? Notably, their group stages haven't been super successful. That is a key to look out for, that if Boom doesn't get themselves off to a good start, if they aren't setting themselves up for later success in the main event, that could be something that could be of detriment to them. But either way, this is still a fantastic team. Very, very skilled players, individually and as a team. And I'm just super stoked to see how they do. And if things don't work out, do they make more roster changes? This feels like a pretty promising roster, but we have seen them make changes in the past, and we'll see if more are needed. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, more previews to come before the last chance qualifier starts. So if you don't want to miss that, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.